Hello and welcome to this Construction News webinar. My name is Len Bingley and I'm the editor of Construction News. Today we'll be looking at an incredibly important topic, the way that contracts can influence the way the whole industry does business. Construction faces a lot of challenges around profitability, investment in innovation, in technology adoption, in risk allocation, in dispute resolution, and all of these things I think are quite firmly linked to the way projects are contracted in the first place. We're going to be looking in particular at the NEC4 suite of contracts, which were updated just last year, and we're focusing on the link with innovation. We're very grateful to our sponsor today, Oracle Construction and Engineering, for backing this topic and for making today's webinar possible. Now, a panel of experts will be joining me in just a moment, and during the webinar, we'll be taking questions via the Q&A function that hopefully you'll be able to see on your screen. So please don't hold back, do post questions as soon as they occur, and we'll do our best to cover as many as we can in the time available. So if our panelists could all switch on their cameras now and unmute, I'm delighted to be joined by Nora Fung, Associate Director in the Legal Group at Arup, Kuda Kadangura, Head of Procurement at UK Parliament, Werner Maritz, Director of Industry Strategy at Oracle Construction and Engineering, Chris Woodbridge, Business Development Executive at RPC UK, and Glenn Hyde, Director at GMH Planning. I'm going to ask each of them to say a few words about themselves by way of introduction. Nora, would you mind going first and introducing yourself?
Okay. Hi, Len. Hi, everyone. My name is Nora Fung. I am a lawyer, as Len mentioned, and I'm an associate director with Arup. Have been with them since 2014. So I am the UKMEA legal discipline lead for contracts and transactions, and I'm also the sector legal lead for infrastructure. Overall, my responsibility is in terms of leading the legal team support for contracts and transactions, both at pre-bid stage and during project delivery, and I work very closely with the project teams and clients on the contractual frameworks. So this topic is certainly very close to my heart. I also work very closely with business to raise commercial awareness and legal awareness by regular training. And prior to joining Arup, I was also in-house at another major consultant. And prior to that, I was working at ACE, and I retain my involvement with ACE to this day. I sit on the Legal and Commercial Committee, and I'm also a vice chair of FIDIC's Risk, Liability and Quality Committee. That's me. Thank you, Len.
Thanks very much, Nora. Kuda, would you like to go next, please?
Yeah, my name is Kuda. I'm head of procurement works consultant at UK Parliament. I've been with the UK Parliament for almost 2 years now. I've used the NEC for more than 20 years. I'm accredited NEC project manager, NEC 3 and 4. I've worked on major projects like the Olympics, Crossrail, HS2, and in the Middle East. So I do specialize in construction contracts. And also I'm a specialist in public procurement as well. I'm actually the country representative for the World Bank. I do review procurement regulations and also innovations in construction. The report is published annually in the Doing Business report. Thank you.
Thanks, Kuda. Werner.
Thanks, Lem, and thanks for the opportunity for Oracle Construction and Engineering to take part in this webinar today. As Lem said, my name is Werner Maritz. I'm a Director of Industry Strategy at Oracle's Construction and Engineering Business Unit. And I've got a keen interest in public sector infrastructure development. I've been with that business unit now for just on 9 years, involved in infrastructure. So I'm a resident in Johannesburg, South Africa. And as you may know, South Africa is a keen user of the NEC contract with approval from the Construction Industry Development Board, as well as the National Treasury in terms of infrastructure development management systems. And it's an approved contract in South Africa for public sector procurement. So a number of large public and private sector organizations here use mainly the NEC 3 still for infrastructure projects. And over the last couple of years, I've been involved in a number of state-owned enterprises in their assessment and selection of Oracle software platforms for the management of NEC contracts. So Oracle Construction and Engineering provides a smart construction platform which really helps to connect project teams and foster collaboration. And it empowers team members with intelligence to make informed decisions and proactive decisions through predictive analytics. It also helps to synchronize programs, people, resources, and payments as the work progresses. So in summary, we really help to promote digital transformation in the engineering and construction industry, and thereby drive performance, predictability, and continuous improvement across the asset delivery process. Back to you, Lem.
Thanks very much. Chris, if you'd like to go next, please.
Hi, I'm Chris Woodbridge. I'm business development at RPC UK. So RPC are a consultancy and Oracle partner that specialise in exclusively Oracle solutions, software, and of course we support that with consultancy services and training that runs alongside that. I personally have worked in the technology space now for around 10 years across a number of different areas, including information management, BIM, field management, but with a particular interest in NEC contracts in particular. I've also spent a bit of time managing and helping to organise conferences and also a LinkedIn group with one of our other talkers, Glenn Hyde, as well. So a really interesting subject for myself, yeah, I really appreciate the chance to come on and join this board of people.
Thanks very much, Chris. And finally, Glenn is not only going to introduce himself, but he's going to say a few words of positioning about NEC. So over to you, Glenn.
Hi, Lem. Thanks again for the chance to speak today. Yeah, really interesting topic. I'm Glenn Hyde. I run GMH Planning, and we're a specialist consultancy that just focus on NEC forms of contracts. That's all we actually get involved with. And it's quite nice because it's, I actually believe and very much like and promote what NEC contracts are trying to achieve, certainly compared to some other forms of contracts, not necessarily quite as sort of clear, transparent and proactive, I think, as NEC has been. As a business, we've been providing training since 2006. So in that time, I've got to see a lot of different contracts, obviously work with a lot of different clients and help in some ways myself and other independent consultants like myself, we've kind of helped shape how NEC has developed as well. So we've been able to advise the authors of a contract what we think works, what doesn't, and they do listen. And some of the changes have then sort of led from either the LinkedIn group that Chris mentioned, or as consultants, we've been able to sort of promote some of the changes that have now sort of found their way into NEC4. So yeah, it might be worthwhile, Lem, as you said, just for me to sort of set the scene with some of the aspects that NEC4 has for today's topic, which is obviously innovation. Now, NEC has been around since 93 when it was first launched. So NEC contracts in various guises, NEC2, NEC3, have long encouraged sort of collaboration, transparency, and just really good practice project management. That's really what's at the heart of NEC contracts. And we've seen its growth massively within the UK. It's probably the most widely used contract now, I think it's fair to say, in the UK. And as Werner's mentioned, internationally, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, Hong Kong, amongst others. So it's increasing use internationally as well. So NEC4 was actually launched in 2017. And as we mentioned, there was an update in 2019, a few sort of small enhancements. And whilst not all clients have switched over yet, they're kind of in the process of. And NEC4 itself has introduced some further additional processes or enhancements that should help encourage innovation and efficiencies. So yeah, worthy of highlighting some of those. So let's talk through some of them. Section 16, the first one. So contractors' proposals. This now sort of allows value engineering opportunities that previously wasn't there. So the contractor can now propose a change to the client's scope and actually share in the savings. Whereas under NEC3, if a contractor proposed under option A, a saving to the client's works information, as it was called, then it will be a negative CE, and the contractor not only lost money, but lost the fee, and so they had nothing in it. So what was really in it for them? So NEC4 has now added a value engineering ratio whereby a share of the saving will go to the contractor. We've also got X21, whole life cost saving, where the contractor could propose changes to the scope that, whilst will cost the client money now, will have long-term benefits for the end user in the long run. So it's a balance then as to cost now versus the savings later. Can we afford it? Can we do it? So that's a great new initiative. So enhanced materials that would limit maintenance or avoid replacement or save heating bills. It could be anything, but whole life cost saving, there's the potential to introduce those. X22 formalizes ECI. So there's a whole secondary option now for an EC4 where the contractor gets on board early during stage 1 with the opportunity to then going on to be given instruction to proceed to stage 2, where they then go ahead and obviously sort of build the works as well. So real opportunities there for the contractor to be early on the scene, helping develop that design. We've also got another new secondary option, X10, BIM. So BIM's a massive topic and probably too big a topic to go into massive detail today, but at least NEC4 now recognises that the BIM model should be highlighted and can be working alongside the NEC contract. Another subtle change is that NEC4 finally sort of highlights the use of cloud-based systems to manage the flow of communications between the parties. So very subtly, it's now referencing the use of cloud-based systems, which is a good innovation there. And X12, the name of X12 has changed. It used to be called partnering. It's now called multi-party collaboration. So again, just a better name where individuals contracted by the client can still be sort of brought together under a common goal and have common objectives to achieve things across multiple contracts. And the last one I mentioned, whilst isn't new, we've still got X20, which is maybe underutilized before, but KPIs, key performance indicators, they can basically encourage any sort of initiatives that as a client you're trying to encourage. So whether this be quality or safety or somehow sort of social values or any of the innovation topics we're talking about today, we've always got KPIs that we could drop on to try and encourage those various elements. So Len, that's just a few ways there that NEC4, as I see it, is trying to very much promote both collaboration and innovation. Thanks
very much, Glenn. Nora, as a lawyer, I wonder whether you could give a view on the particular advantages of NEC4. I mean, we still see NEC3 used in places. What do you think the main benefits might be?
I think the benefits is in relation to the bigger suite of documents that can use now. There's an alliance contract, which I think is certainly very useful in reinforcing the collaborative nature of the NEC. And I think as speaking as a consultant, obviously I'm very familiar with the PSE, and one of the huge glaring omissions as part of the NEC suite was the sub-consultancy agreement, and now we've got that. So I think all that's really positive, and some of the drafting changes in terminology and the harmonization of language across the suite, I think makes it much more cohesive. So I think that's all very positive. There are, of course, the flip side, which as a lawyer I will talk about, but I will stick with the positives for now.
We'll come on to those negatives, I guess, as we go along. And Kuda, from your perspective as a client, representative as a client organisation, what do you think the advantages are in the way that NEC4 is moving the trajectory, that it's the kind of things that Glenn was talking about in the cloud-based and these different variations that we see?
Yeah, I think the introduction of the value engineering clauses has actually that does help, especially in price-based contracts, where if a contractor proposes a change, then they would benefit from the saving. We didn't see that in price-based contracts before, and also just maintaining even in the target cost contracts, that sort of pay-and-share, gain-share mechanism does help contractors to innovate. But the key thing is making sure that that percentage is large enough for the contractor to be encouraged, to innovate, and that gain share as well is large enough. You don't want to put a very small percentage and then they're discouraged from innovating. So, yeah, that's the good thing about the NEC4. And as Parliament, we are moving towards NEC4 just like any other employer. There are quite big advantages. Some of them is BIM as well, being an next option that's included now. In Parliament, we are actually working on that. Thinking in BIM, I think the technology is moving, and talking of collaboration, then we think BIM is going to move to integration with web-based technologies, which is the Internet of Things. So we see the advantages of technology, and NEC4 does enable that, which is great.
Thanks very much, Kuda. We're definitely going to come on to a lot of the things that you touched on there as we go through the webinar. Chris, I'm going to turn to you with a next question. To what extent can we really expect contracts to drive innovation and changes and behavior and things like that? I mean, so often, the contracting relationship seems to come down to cost. From the perspective of your organization, you're very focused on project management, project planning. How real is that link between the contract, how it's drafted, and delivering real innovation?
I think from a technology perspective, we've already seen quite a bit of innovation that's been gained just from the pure existence of the NEC contract. It's really prescriptive in what you need to do, when you need to do it, and how that's done. And as a result, it is fairly administratively burdensome. So we've seen a huge uptake in technology just to solve that challenge. With regards to the cost element of that, I would say, I think just through the adoption of that technology and the need to solve that challenge, organizations are already starting to realize the benefits of having technology, both in that area and others. Whilst there's a cost to these solutions, the benefits that are gained from time savings, that the cost of administration, minimizing risk and the potential penalties and the disputes that could come out of it far outweigh the upfront cost that needs to be invested. With regards to moving forward, I think the main change is going to be about further enhancing the technology that we're using, but probably better integration with other functions and platforms as well. So if we say there's a huge drive right now for better connectivity, better visibility, and therefore the data that can be leveraged from the systems that we're using, Glenn, I'm going to quote you here actually from one of the conferences that I attended that's always stuck with me. You said that the program is the beating heart of the contract. And I think from, again, a technology perspective, the contract's going to very much become the beating heart of the project and ultimately sit right at the heart of the technology solutions that are adapted. And there's going to be different connections and different bits of information that need to drive around different areas, but that's kind of where I see things going. It's all about better connectivity and I guess better collaboration off the back of that.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Werner, if I could turn to you, I mean, obviously Oracle's very focused on, got a vested interest in seeing greater technology adoption across the industry, and construction's often singled out as a real laggard when it comes to adopting technology compared to other industries. I think we outrank forestry and fishing, but not much else. Can a contract like NEC4 really help to correct that? Can it really push people to really think about things like cloud-based systems and things like BIM? And what do you think? Is this going to be a long haul, or is NEC4 going to help to speed things up?
Yeah, I think you're right. In many parts of the world, the public sector procurement specifically is not always geared towards buying value for money assets. And many public procurement frameworks are really favoring price as opposed to quality and capability. But the bottom line is, whichever contractor wins that work, even if it's very, very price competitive, they must not be able to deliver that contract for the price that they tendered, right? They can't go into a situation where they're willingly going to make a loss on the contract. So by all accounts, contractors operate on a low profit margin. When we go into some of these contractors, we see 3%, 5% margin. And think about if that contractor just wants to go from a 5% margin to something so like a 6% margin. It sounds like 1% improvement, right? But it's actually 20% improvement. A 20% improvement in either efficiency, productivity, cost containment, And really, these contractors then really need to do something significantly different. It's a step change in their business. It's not just tweaking the processes, it's actually doing something fundamental different. And although you're right, we see a slow adoption of technology, I think our recent past over the last year and a half actually rapidly pushed technology adoption, not just through the contract, but the working environment and the working conditions. And digital adoption and digital transformation is really a way to improve that productivity out in the field and in the construction environment. So as an example of a steps change, making decisions on projects and contracts are important. Unfortunately, we see a lot of decisions being made on data that's being captured late, erratically, reporting on the history. You can't really make decisions based on it, you can't trust it. And for contractors and contract managers to go into a scenario where they want to make proactive decisions based on predictive analytics and different scenarios based on what's currently happening and key indicators, and really to leverage the capability and technology that's presented by things like artificial intelligence and machine learning. I mean, that's a step change. That's really changing the behavior and the way that businesses run. But of course, these innovations that are available today, you can come to Oracle and you can purchase them. But there's always an investment from the business, and the investment of the business on the digital transformation needs to be played off against the benefit. So it's always important for us to help our customers understand within any project, any contract, the investments they make in the technology, there's really a benefit that they can achieve. And I think a contract like NEC4 now with Clause X10, as I pointed out with information management is really about collaboration, right? It helps us to avoid errors. It helps us to protect the contractor and the contract margins. So the ability to bring things like building information modeling or information management into the contract, helping with value engineering, that can really help our contractors to benefit their bottom line, right? If they get a percentage of the savings, that's great. And the last thing I want to discuss is the fact that contractors with low margins are very dependent on cash flow, correct? If they don't get paid, then they've got a cash flow problem. So with NEC4 saying that the contractor must apply for a payment certificate, that certificate can only be seen valid if the contractor's got really access to valid information that can be validated that the environment, the whole building industry, but essentially construction industry, to move towards digitization, to be able to draw on these information sources, to be able to manage a contract like the NEC4. Over back to you, Lynn.
Thanks, Werner. Glenn, if I come back to you, I mean, Werner raised some very good points there about the financial impact and the way NEC4 can help. And you talked about value engineering as well. And are there other ways in which you can think that it's pushing people away from that sort of race to the bottom that we all fear in construction, that people are going to end up, that they bid for work below their cost and then try and claw it back?
Yeah,
obviously.
I mean, the key here to me is that this has to be client-led. So if the clients are on board, that they can see the benefits of these initiatives, then if they can articulate that clearly within the scope requirements at tender stage, then it won't be a problem, because the contractors know exactly what they're tendering. And if all of those initiatives are built into the scope, then the contractors can price accordingly. The problems come when the contractors are expected to do initiatives that they haven't priced for and they won't benefit from. I think Kuda and Werner both mentioned that contractors, let's face it, they've got to be incentivized. They've got to be something in it for them as well. Yeah, contractors obviously want to please their client. They want repeat work, but they're also in it to make money and to be solvent and look after all of their workforce. So this needs to be sort of a shared incentive, shared benefit along the way. So it really starts from clients promoting this from the outset, making sure it's clear what we're looking for, and then all the contractors pricing know that's what's expected, and they can then obviously still do the job and make a bit of money as well, and everyone's getting something out of this.
Thanks very much, Glenn. Nora, from your perspective, what's your view on how perhaps the financial aspects are affected, and perhaps I thought you might also be able to talk about risk as well, or how risk might be handled differently.
Yeah, and I think just going back to what Glenn was saying, actually, it's got to be client-led. And I totally agree that the risk element plays a huge part, certainly for consultants. But I would like to just take it back a little bit and talk about, when you talk about using contracts to really drive forward innovation and technology adoption. I agree with what I think Chris you mentioned earlier about using technology to make the process, the administration of the contracts much simpler. So far, it's faster. It just makes things a lot easier. And I think that's all really, really good. But fundamentally, I think contracts are not the kind of only tool that you need. They're the framework to help move things along, but you do need that client engagement and the client driver to really pull things along. And just I'd like to take IP actually, because that's something that's very, very close to my heart. And under the NEC4, for instance, the ownership of the IP vests in the consultant, which is great, and we can use that to look at innovation. But actually, when you look at the way that BIM and the X option X10 is structured, the ownership of the BIM model vests in the clients. So there's immediately a bit of a disconnect there. So what does that mean to the consultant who's expected to innovate? Well, I think that it just makes it confusing. And I do think that if X9 is also chosen, for instance, in which case the ownership of copyright transfers to the client, then consultants will be less inclined to innovate, because that just stops them from using some of the know-how which they've gained during the process itself on other projects, and bringing things back to the construction playbook, for instance, taking that longer term and really driving things like social value across. These are all really important things, which I think the client will just need to adopt and make a decision about this right at the start and commit to it. And part of it, you're right, Lem, the risk aspect of it is huge. Again, looking at the NEC4 PSC, the liability arrangement under that is quite risky actually for a consultant. And when you look at the current framework and the current environment in which consultants operate, the hardening insurance market, for instance, all these are factors which do contribute towards consultants and contractors alike just taking a much more conservative stance in coming forward with innovative solutions. But one of the biggest things I do find as part of my role in advising the business is that we very, very infrequently, if never, find an NEC4 which is used in and of itself unamended. The volume of Z clauses we see is astounding. And it takes time to go through this. So and I take Glenn's point about the thrust of the NEC4 and the aims and intentions, all very good. And some of it is reversed by the lengthy Z clauses that we do see.
Yes, thanks, Nora. It's something that we've explored in the legal opinion section on construction use, how often the additions and amendments undermine the thrust of the contract in the first place. Kuda, several of the other panelists have talked about the importance of how the client behaves in this whole equation. Really interested in your view, especially on sort of driving innovation, and innovation comes with risk. I mean, I guess from a client perspective, you really want to see innovation on the project just before you're one or something like that. I don't know. Definitely. What's your view on how you hope to see the contracts encourage innovation in the projects that you commission?
Yeah, the employer has to be ready first in the organization. There has to be organizational readiness for that innovation to take place. There has to be a culture that accepts that innovation. So it's all employer driven, really. The way you write your scope or works information is in itself can send a message to the market that you are ready for innovation. You want innovation on your projects. Your processes should be designed for this innovation to take place. So there is an issue of the people that you bring in. There's an issue of systems, the technology, that in itself, how it's the infrastructure for that innovation. But the problem is, that happens is that resistance or slow uptake to innovation. So clients needs to be also educated in terms of the benefits of BIM, shorter project life cycles, better safety, because you can see hazards before they occur in the BIM model. You can actually cost load the BIM. You can see if there are disputes as well. It's easier to resolve disputes if you've got a BIM model. So it's a matter of education to increase the client adoption. So, but I mean, there are huge advantages in terms of actually moving to BIM, because the whole world is becoming very digitized. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Kuda.
Yeah.
Just a reminder, we got 134 participants today. If you've got a question for our panel, do stick in the Q&A, and we'll try and get a good answer for you. But right now we're moving on to another topic. Werner, perhaps you can kick us off with this one. Obviously, projects involve many participants, big complex supply chains in construction. How do we sort of try and get the good things that we're trying to achieve through these contractual changes to filter down through to perhaps some of the smaller providers that are participating in projects? How does that work in practice?
Thanks, Lem. I think if we look at the bigger picture, it's about information flow, right? So team collaboration, project formation, information flow is what brings that team together throughout the supply chain. And information flow is what will keep them together during the project. It's almost like a marriage where information is quite important. And of course, contract management is not the only place where we're dependent on the information. When we look at design collaboration, we're dependent on the information. And as an example, within the UK, you've got the UK BIM Alliance, and they've recently incorporated ISO 19650 standard into your UK BIM framework. And it's really to talk about information management. And to make sure that information sources can talk together, there's organizations like Building Smart who really helps to bring disparate systems and silos of data together through open data standards like the IFC or the BIM collaboration format. But it's about standards and interoperability. And I think if you look at something like an NEC4 and the adoption throughout a country like the UK, that's almost bringing interoperability in terms of contracts, to be able to share information with a common vocabulary, common data schema through different organizations. And of course, if you've got that standardization of contract across the industry, it becomes easy for technology vendors like ourselves to provide that as a cloud solution. Now, when we look at what many players in the industry do, is that the project owner, mostly, who is very interested in the project information at the completion of the project, they would make these platforms available to the rest of the project. We would call them appointing parties or lead appointed parties if we're talking about the main contractor. And they would make these systems available for everybody to work on the same platform. Now, of course, the important thing there is you work on real-time data, one version of the truth. And the benefit of those systems, like what Chris will discuss, is the security, to make sure the security of information. Your contractor or subcontractor or smaller party to the contract, they don't have to worry about things like backups and disaster recovery and all sorts of things. That's taken care of. And as soon as you take the technology fear away out of the adoption, you take the security fear away. People start trusting the system, they start trusting the information. And it really then helps them to make that shift to say, I'm going to go away from my traditional piece of paper, I'm going to adopt this technology platform because it's supplied by the project owner, maybe. I don't have to pay for it, so there's no cost barrier. But ultimately, that asset owner or the project owner, they are the ones who really benefit from this wide adoption. And that's the way that we should make these platforms available to industries through wide adoption, so that there's one version of the truth to work from. And I guess, Nora, you will agree that one version of the truth becomes really useful when there's compensation events and disputes, right? And that's what we're trying to achieve. So there's really big benefit for the whole supply chain to buy into these platforms.
Thanks,
Thank
Werner.
you.
Chris, what's your view on this question about making sure that that we're not just focusing on the main contractor principal contractor kind of relationship, but we foster innovation and these good things that we're trying to achieve through modernizing contracts through the rest of the supply chain?
I'm going to echo probably a number of things that Werner just touched on. It's really hard to manage processes across multiple organizations, and it's really hard to drive the data integrity, to have that visibility into progress, and projects are getting bigger every day and they're getting more complex, and that sheer size and complexity of the projects are starting to amplify many of the challenges that have been around for a while. And of course, the more parties that are collaborating, the more risk there is from a disjointed approach. So we're not going to solve them using manual processes or siloed solutions. In fact, they can potentially introduce additional risks to both the budget and the schedule, almost by design. So some of those challenges again are, duplicate stores of information, so we don't get the single source of the truth, as Werner and Nora just mentioned. We get manual error-prone data entry when it could be automated because the work's already being done elsewhere, so the data's already there. There's no audit trail, there's no visibility to drive decisions. It's difficult to understand who's accountable. So from a technology perspective, again, what we need is more of a sophisticated and integrated solution where I believe the contract is at the heart of the project and allows the entire supply chain to move to the same beat as opposed to their own ones, and one that allows the aggregation of data from multiple functions that naturally fit together. And when I say different functions that naturally fit together, I'm thinking cost, I'm thinking schedule, I'm thinking risk, and I'm thinking contract. They all impact each other. And by doing that, you can create a fully integrated project control solution, in effect, and you can minimize the risks of that manual or duplicating data that's already there. So we've actually been doing some pretty interesting work in that area. So these aren't pipe dreams. We've been delivering some pretty groundbreaking solutions already using Oracle's project governance platform, which is Primavera Unify, and we've been doing that with the Ministry of Defence. So as you said, Werner, security is a big thing for them. We've been doing it with Dublin Airport, and that began with managing cost and then leveraging the built-in native integration to P6 so we can deliver the next generation of value management tools. But more recently, we've added our latest NEC4 functionality so we can get another piece of that puzzle into the solution. And it really allows us to kind of offer a more holistic approach to contract management. As you can imagine, having all of those solutions together generates quite a lot of data, but by having one solution rather than multiple siloed solutions, you can bring all of that data together and turn it into really valuable insights in real time that will help obviously influence decision making, but in some cases we're using it to predict future problems that could arise. So pretty exciting times, I think, in technology with the way that it's evolving now. And I think, we've touched on a number of other areas that I think is going to drive even further innovation. We mentioned BIM, and that would be a great topic to discuss again at some point in further detail around NEC. We've talked about the Internet of Things and machine learning and AI. I think there's going to be some huge quantum leaps in what we're able to do in the future in technology. So yeah, exciting times.
I'm sure you're right, Chris. And I'm sure it's going to be a big sort of sieve effect as well. Of those companies that get on board are going to leapfrog those that don't. I'm going to jump onto some of the questions that we've had in from the audience now, as they're pretty interesting stuff, and I'd like to make sure we cover them. I wonder whether Nora, you might be able to tackle this question. It's talking about what are your thoughts on R&D tax credits being applied through contracts? R&D on the project may well be collaborative. Who gets to claim the R&D tax credit if more than one party is involved? Any thoughts? Maybe that's a question for an accountant, not a lawyer. I don't.
Yes, I hear the word tax and I do start thinking, I'm actually not. I don't think I'm the best person to answer that particular question. But I think in terms of R&D, that's vital in any contract, and that goes towards the profitability. I can't even speak at the moment. The profitability of a contract and the profit margin. And I think the construction playbook, I do keep coming back to the construction playbook because I think that's a fantastic document, and the principles embodied within that are will, if clients incorporate that into their contracts and push that forward, it will achieve things that we've been talking about. So, but I do think it's important to make sure that there is an amount of profitability. And the line that I just quickly highlighted is, and it came straight out from that, says contracts should be designed to be profitable, right? There's no harm in that, and it's not a shameful thing. And by doing that, we'll make sure that we do have enough resource to invest into other things. But in terms of the tax point, I'm afraid I can't answer that question.
You did very well with your answer, bearing in mind it's not your area of expertise. Does anybody on the panel have a view on R&D tax credits before we move on? I think we'll move on. Glenn, perhaps you could answer a question posed by someone called Martin on the call. What measures are in place to assure that value engineering is applied properly and to a recognised standard? I suppose the question there is about how do we avoid arguments about that value engineering assignment of benefit?
Yeah, well, the risk allocation doesn't change with the value engineering. So if this is a client, well, this will be the contractor's proposals are where it's a client's design scope. So it will be for the client to obviously check and interrogate that what's been suggested is a good idea and will come, bring the benefits that it seeks to achieve. And that's the same with whole life cost savings, actually, with X21. The client can't say, yeah, we'll have that idea, we'll spend the money now, we'll save money in the long run, and then 5 years later say, hang on, we didn't save that money, we want our money back. So they've got to be making sure that what's on offer and the potential for what it will achieve is actually going to be realized. So in terms of if they're proposing a value engineering idea, it will be for the client to go back to their own designers and check, okay, will this work? Does this work? It's not now that the contractor is going to take on that liability. And obviously, if the client's any doubt, I guess they'll say no. But at least the whole idea is, at least it's there. It's incentivizing the contractor to come up with these ideas, because as it stands with NEC3, if there's nothing in it for them, why would they do it?
Absolutely. Thanks, Glenn. This next question seems possibly tailored for Kuda to tackle, from Tim Bizabani. What is the government doing as a client to encourage collaborative working under NEC? I mean, that's a big, important facet of what NEC4 is trying to achieve, isn't it? Better collaboration between client and contractor. Is the government doing enough to push that, do you think, Kuda?
It is doing it quite a lot. I mean, the government promoted the NEC contract, and now they've come up with their construction playbook. So, and also they also introduced BIM, that's minimum BIM level 2. So you can see BIM is all about collaboration. So whatever the government is doing is actually forcing the industry to move towards collaboration and innovation. Yeah.
Thanks, Kuda.
Can I add a point, Lem, that speaking on Kuda's behalf, a very valid point that Nora made was about the dreaded Z clauses from clients. So I will say I've got first-hand experience of Parliament, and if I say Parliament Z clauses are not too bad, that is a compliment. Because they've been much more rationalised and they've been stripped right back, and not these nasty transfer of risk that sometimes clients still think it's in their interest. Why? goodness knows, because all of that risk increase comes at a cost. So,
yeah.
Thanks very much, Glenn. Chris, you might have a view on this question from Mary Ann. How does NEC4 deal with the COVID-19 effects that we've seen with delays and the various other difficulties that companies are facing? And I guess we're also seeing now in material shortages at the moment. Is there flexibility in the way that NEC4 sets things out that helps to avoid disputes in this kind of situation?
I'd probably suggest that's a better question for someone like Glenn, actually, rather than myself. I mean, obviously, from a technology perspective, again, the fact that the technology is out there that's cloud-based now and it's mobile, and there's a lot of people, you know, not working from offices. That certainly helped to manage things during this during this this whole situation that we've been faced with. But with regards to how NEC can be leveraged to help, you know, minimize the amount of issues that come from that, Glenn, that might be something that you could probably answer, because you've probably faced a few of those challenges during this time.
Yeah, well, I mean, COVID is, well, I was going to say it's one big compensation event, but actually some clients managed to write that out somehow as well. So, so COVID was left with some contractors, and not particularly fair or honourable. So COVID, obviously, really unprecedented. That word's used too much, but this was really unprecedented. And I think most clients, to be fair, have embraced and said, yeah, okay, not something you could have expected. Well, not 2 years ago anyway, and dealt with as a compensation event. And the way it should have been dealt, we advise this in the group, is you do it piecemeal. You know, it's not a case of, well, waiting to see COVID over. I don't know if we'll ever see if COVID's over, to be honest. But the idea should have been that, well, we know we're going to be shut down for the next 5 weeks. So let's deal with that as a CE, deal with it in terms of cost and time. And then in 5 weeks' time, we'll then see, are we going to be shut down longer, or are we back with different social distancing measures? So then we can deal with that as a separate compensation event at that point. To think that you'll wait till the end of COVID and then look back, well, let's come up with a fair assessment. Well, sort of good luck. And I guess the other one that was mentioned was materials. We put this in our LinkedIn group recently, and yeah, it's a new issue. Well, it is a new big issue, and one way is X1. So X1, as well as dealing with inflation, does have an index for indice changes for materials and things like that. So I think we might see an increase now in X1, because again, clients can't just put these problems on the contractors and expect them to deal with it. And well, it's a lump sum price. Northern Ireland, for example, I think over there, the government have stepped in and said, yeah, okay, we recognise this as a problem and we're going to do something to help. And even in here, I believe Welsh Water have done a similar thing. So they're recognising that whilst technically, you know, it is a risk item that's in the contractor's pot, they realise they need to help or do something. So yeah, I think that's there is some mechanisms in NEC already, but I think that's something that's going to be more focused on. For example, COVID now, I would recommend there is some kind of compensation event or Z clause written in to deal with COVID for all future contracts that are signed, so that when you're entering into an agreement, you know what your liability is for COVID at that point, and if it gets worse, clearly that will be a CE. You can't be expected to price for lockdown. Who knows? Hopefully no more lockdowns. Who knows? Maybe Kuda will know. He sits next door to Boris, so maybe he'll know.
Yeah, no, I wanted to add to that from a client point of view. 2 weeks ago, I was in a procurement supply chain conference, and my recommendation was clients have to listen to the market right now. We got to work collaboratively with the contractors. We cannot simply just pass the risk willy-nilly. Otherwise, it's going to cost us more. For example, X1. The X1, I think, is going to be more frequent. I agree with Glenn. But even the indices themselves, for example, if it's the prices of steel are rapidly fluctuating, some of the indices might not be able to capture it. Even in an option A, you might have to carve out that material, for example, steel that's rapidly fluctuating, and put it per ton. For example, contract date, when you sign the contract, you might say 500 per ton. 6 weeks later, it's already £700 per ton. and pay the difference. And this is actually sort of like us to what you would expect in price-based contract. But we are in a very unusual times. So we got to work with the contractors collaboratively and listen to them and try to address their challenges. And that's the only way out. And NEC4 is a very good contract to do that.
Thanks very much, Kuda. Werner, I think we should get everyone's views on this topic. It's so topical, isn't it? I mean, you talked about the single version of the truth being a really important asset in disputes. And I guess that's what you would say in these sort of circumstances as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen lots of contracts which drag out years and years and years to actually be resolved, simply because, no offense to Nora, but the lawyers are trying to find information to go and address the disputes. So I think one version of the truth, one cloud platform for everybody, really would help to actually address these type of claims, especially in being able to prove what actual cost was incurred because of it. So if you have an accurate record of cost incurred, accurate record on the program of what delays was actually incurred and the reason for them, I think it will place the lawyers and the project managers in a much better position to actually get to an answer on what should be done. I know different countries, different companies, different responses. FIDIC contracts have different responses to NEC contracts. So again, there's no one answer for everybody, but certainly information helps.
Yes.
Well, I think, Werner, that's something we hear quite often from lawyers. If you're the best armed with evidence, you tend to be at an advantage. Nora, what's your advice to our listeners about the likelihood of getting embroiled in disputes and how different contracts might or might not help them?
Records. That, I think, is key, and Bern is absolutely right. We always say keep accurate records of everything, write everything down. You do need that audit trail. Now, if there's an electronic system of getting all this in place, fantastic. So I do think it's vitally important. But it's disputes are almost inevitable in a way. You go into a contract, you go into a project not wanting to head into that route, but the record keeping is useful, not just for disputes, but in terms of change management, in order to be able to demonstrate your entitlement to additional fees. So I think records come in all sorts of guises and not just disputes, but it can be a really positive thing as well. But it is a cultural difference, it's a mindset, and all members of the team just need to get into the habit. And paper versions just do not work. I remember when I first started back in the 90s, and you go into a porter cabin and there's bits of paper everywhere, and you do think, wow, where do I start? Things are better now, and I think they can get better.
Thanks very much, Nora. We're into our last 5 minutes. We've got an interesting question from Stuart Wright here. And Chris, I'm going to come back to you. Maybe you have better luck with this one. Is there any merit in incorporating innovation as a KPI in your contract?
Actually, I'm going to say again, probably that how we incorporate those KPIs into the contracts, probably not one for myself. I'd probably argue again that could be more for Kuda or Glenn. If they're in there, we can put processes into the technology to allow those to be managed. But I think with regards to the benefits, it's probably the people that are managing these on a practical level that will be able to give a better answer, I think.
Well,
is anyone
looking
in
at the time limits, I can answer that nice and quickly for you. Yes.
It's a little bit too quick, yeah.
No, there's obviously, you could do anything with a KPI, and I think that is going to be, that is a way of definitely encouraging it. So the thing with KPI is obviously they've got to be measurable, they've got to be tangible. But yeah, the potential is that is a key way. I think that KPIs are underutilized, and the ones that are done are sometimes not very good. But a good KPI can really drive the right behaviors really, really very well.
Thanks very much, Glenn. And Kuda, I can see you nodding in agreement there. Is there anything you'd like to add on that, the business of putting innovation into KPIs?
Oh, totally. You know, as Glenn said, they have to be measurable. Unfortunately, some of them are very subjective. You know, that's the problem. But KPIs, utilization of, you know, of course, value engineering, the contractor's proposal option, that encourages innovation.
I suppose that's
Certainly.
the point of having early contractor involvement as well, isn't it, Kuda? To maybe that's the space in which you do some exploration of what those KPIs should be.
Yes, you know, if you're going to be involved in early contract involvement, definitely you should try to incentivize the ECI contractor as much as possible. Yeah. Certainly, yeah.
And Werner, I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, maybe not related to KPIs on innovation in a contract, but I think what would be useful and interesting to the folks in the UK is that we're opening a industries innovation lab in Reading, at the Oracle campus in Reading. And really the purpose of that type of lab is for us to bring industry partners, customers, contractors, technology vendors together in a collaborative space, let's use that word again, where people can actually experience technology, play out certain use cases within the construction technology space. And it's really meant as a collaborative space for innovation. So I think things like innovation in contracts, if there's a multi-party who actually wants to leverage that type of facility, speak to Oracle, we can certainly form some sort of plan to assist collaboration to happen there.
Well, thanks very much, Werner, for that positive suggestion. I'm afraid we're out of time. So thanks very much to everybody who tuned in for joining us in this webinar. If you didn't manage to catch the whole thing, a recording will be available shortly and a link will be sent out to everybody who registered to attend to get to see the whole of the recording. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions. Thanks to our sponsor, Oracle, and to our expert panel. To Nora, Kuda, Chris, Glenn, and Werner, thank you. And from all of us here, thank you for watching and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lem.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.